"Sir, you don't belong in first class. Please move." The words cut through the cabin like a cold blade, freezing the air where they landed. Adrian Cole, 49 years old, stood motionless in his worn sneakers and grey hoodie. In his hand, a boarding pass clearly marked Seat 1A. But in front of him, Marla Keating, the head flight attendant with her perfect bun and icy gaze, pointed toward the aisle as if expelling an intruder. No one in the cabin knew that the man they were watching was not just another passenger. He was the chairman of Ether Aviation Group, the parent company that owned this airline. Yet in that moment, he was simply a stranger being doubted, publicly humiliated in a place reserved for those deemed to belong. The soft golden light of the first-class cabin reflected off a glass of champagne in the hand of Sabrina Vale, a young woman in a white cashmere sweater, seated comfortably in Seat 1A. Adrian's seat. She leaned back with a smirk of quiet amusement at the scene unfolding. Marla did not even glance at Adrian's boarding pass. Her eyes scanned him like a dossier, a casual backpack slung over one shoulder, everyday clothes, sun, darkened skin. To her, the file was already written, Adrian Cole, unworthy. "Please vacate this area. We need to finish boarding." Her voice was sharp, metallic. Adrian felt the silence of the other passengers press in like glass. A man in row 3 frowned. A middle-aged couple exchanged hesitant looks. A teenage girl raised her phone, camera recording. Adrian drew in a slow breath. He had flown thousands of times in his life, but never had his rightful seat been stripped away so brazenly. Anger surged, only to be smothered by a colder resolve. He remembered his father's words. Real power does not shout. It moves in silence. And when it moves, the world trembles. "Excuse me. I believe there's a mistake." "This is my seat." Adrian held out the boarding pass. A younger voice interjected, uncertain, tentative. "Let me check the manifest." Theo Park, a flight attendant barely in his 20s, stepped forward with a tablet. His eyes scanned quickly, his brows furrowing. "It says here, Mr. Cole, Seat 1A. Confirmed." But Marla did not waver. She pressed her lips tight, shaking her head. "System error. It happens. He'll have to wait." Sabrina Vale sipped her champagne, eyes flicking toward Adrian like he was an inconvenience. "Perhaps he belongs back there," she said, tilting her chin toward economy. Laughter rippled softly from behind, sharp as thorns. Adrian's heartbeat slowed. All sound collapsed into a dull hum in his ears. He looked at the pass in his hand, then at Seat 1A, the seat that should have been his, now transformed into a symbol of prejudice and misused authority. He could argue. He could raise his voice and prove himself right. Instead, Adrian walked to the galley and sat on the small jump seat, silent as a shadow pulling itself tight. He pulled out his phone, opened the encrypted internal app, and typed 3 words. "Echo alert. Discrepancy on 2207. The message vanished into the system, but its weight was enough to ripple across the skies. In the cabin, eyes stayed fixed on him. Some looked away, pretending not to notice. Others kept filming, waiting for the humiliation of a fraudulent passenger. Marla turned back to her work, smiling coolly at other first-class guests, treating him as if he no longer existed. But they did not know. None of them knew that the man on the jump seat, in a worn hoodie, held the authority to ground the entire fleet with a single signal. Adrian closed his eyes, not to retreat, but to listen. The sound of suitcase wheels rolling on the floor, seats clicking back, whispers thick with annoyance, curiosity, judgment. He felt each glance, each murmur, each silent verdict. He saw himself at 15, told deliveries go to the side entrance on the first day of a business summer camp. 34 years later, the sting of those words still pierced. And today, in the first-class cabin of Flight 2207, the lesson repeated, this time in front of dozens of witnesses, under dozens of lenses. Adrian opened his eyes. Behind their stillness burned unshakable resolve. He did not need to shout. He did not need to argue. All it would take was a single action. One keystroke, and the skies would shift. And those who had looked at him as if he did not belong would soon discover who they had shared this flight with. The first-class cabin door closed behind the last passengers. Soft golden light bathed the luxury around them. Crystal glasses glimmered, leather seats embraced with comfort. Yet beneath that fragile calm, a hidden fire was burning. Adrian Cole still sat on the jump seat near the galley, his boarding pass resting lightly on his knee. He did not look at anyone, only listened, every stray laugh, every whisper. The flow of the cabin had shifted from the excitement of a long flight to curiosity, doubt, and disdain. Marla Keating stepped forward, her smile stretched thin like a taut wire. "Sir, until we verify with the gate, please stay out of first class." Her voice was sweet on the surface, but carried the coldness of an order to expel. Adrian rose, holding out the boarding pass once again. "This is my seat. 1A confirmed." He spoke slowly, deliberately, each word falling like a stone into still water. But Marla did not bother to look. Her eyes scanned him again from head to toe, as if every stitch of his hoodie was proof of unworthiness. Sabrina Vale, still reclined in seat 1A, turned with a half-smile. "Honestly, it's not a big deal. Some people just don't understand how seating works up here." The words floated softly, but in the air they hardened into barbs. A few passengers nodded. Others looked down at the floor, avoiding Adrian's gaze. Then Theo Park, the young attendant, stepped forward with the tablet in his hand. He drew a deep breath, his voice shaky but firm. "According to the manifest, Mr. Cole is indeed assigned to seat 1A. The cabin froze. Marla curled her lip, snapping her head away, as though he had spoken something unnecessary. "Double-check with the gate. We can't rely on glitches." With that, she turned her back, leaving the truth shining plainly on the screen. Adrian did not argue. He stepped back and lowered himself into a seat, not the jump seat this time, but a cramped spot in the last row of economy, right beside the toilet. The air smelled of chemicals and bodies. Doors clattered open and shut with every flush. From the heaven of first class, he had been pushed to the floor. It was no longer a mistake. It was humiliation. He opened his phone again. The screen's pale light reflected in eyes calm yet burning. "Echo alert confirmed. Forced relocation. Document everything." The message vanished. On the other end, an entire system stirred to life. Cameras, digital logs, internal data, all linking into a chain of evidence invisible to Flight 2207. 3 rows ahead, a young man quietly raised his phone, recording Adrian. The red dot blinked steadily. "Did you see that?" he whispered. "They moved him. He said it was his seat." The reply came like an echo. He didn't even fight back, just calm. Adrian leaned against the seat, eyes closed. He was not asleep. He was listening. The sound of wheels dragging bags, a child crying, forced laughter drifting from first class. And beneath it all, a sound without form, the weight of injustice, creeping, pressing, waiting to erupt. In his mind, one thought surfaced clearly. They believe they have won. But in truth, they have only lit the fuse of a battle for which they are utterly unprepared. In the forward cabin, Sabrina Vale raised her phone for a selfie. Her pale smile, champagne raised high. Yet behind her shoulder, framed unknowingly in the shot, sat Adrian, the humiliated man, silent in the back row. An accidental photograph, a perfect testament. To strangers, Adrian was just a passenger in casual clothes, caught in a seating mistake. But within the silence, he was the conductor of a symphony whose rhythm had already changed. They did not know. They could not yet know that the man forced to sit beside the toilet held the power to bring the skies to a halt with nothing more than the touch of a screen. The engines rumbled softly, signaling the flight was about to depart. But inside the cabin, the air was thick, as if every gaze had converged on one place. Adrian Cole sat upright in the last row. He did not speak or move much, yet his silence alone unsettled the entire cabin. Some passengers whispered, "Why won't he leave?" while others discreetly lifted their phones, waiting for the moment of tension to erupt. Marla Keating strode down the aisle with confident steps, a forced smile plastered on her face. She stopped, looked at Adrian from a distance and said, "Sir, for the comfort of all passengers, please remain seated here until we sort things out." Adrian raised his head, his eyes cutting through her mask. Slowly, he stood, not rushed, not showy, but with a calm that made the air itself tremble. His voice was steady, not loud, yet it carried through the cabin. "I have presented my ticket. I have been confirmed by the system, and your own staff have confirmed it. Then why am I still being blocked?" The question hung heavy in the cabin. Silence pressed down. Then Marla replied, her tone still sweet but cold. "Please lower your voice. You're creating a scene." Adrian's face did not change. He stepped forward, raising his boarding pass. "No, I am speaking clearly, not loudly. It is your unreasonable refusal that has created this scene." A middle-aged woman in row 2 whispered to her husband, "He's right. They already checked." The man shook his head, silent, but his eyes uneasy. Behind them, phones lifted higher. Red recording lights blinked. Evidence was piling up, second by second. Sabrina Vale finally looked up from her champagne. "You're still here?" she scoffed, half amused, half annoyed. Adrian turned to her, eyes like ice. He said nothing. He did not need to. That look alone silenced her, forcing her to swallow her smirk and turn away in discomfort. At that moment, Theo Park appeared, his young face tense, his voice shaky but firm. "Gate has confirmed again. Mr. Cole is 1A. There's no mistake." Marla spun around, her smile gone. "We'll hear from the gate in writing. Until then, he stays put." Her voice cut sharp like steel. Adrian drew a deep breath. He knew his patience was not weakness, but a weapon. Yet he also understood that if he allowed this to continue, the story would be twisted beyond recognition. He turned, facing the nearby rows, his voice resonant. "Ladies and gentlemen, look closely. I have shown every proof. The system has confirmed it. Yet I am still denied, still pushed to the back. I only ask to sit in the seat I paid for. Nothing more, nothing less." A wave of murmurs rippled through the cabin. A young man pulled out his phone, live streaming to social media. "This guy, they kicked him out of first class, even though it's his seat." Viewers flooded in, the numbers climbing fast. Marla Keating froze. She could see clearly that control was slipping away. Yet instead of retreating, she stepped forward, pressing harder. "If you do not comply, we may call airport security." The moment shattered the air. Gasps, the sound of seats snapping upright, the surge of chatter. The cabin had become a public courtroom, Marla and Adrian standing on opposite sides. Adrian did not rage. He did not argue. He sat down on the nearby jump seat, his eyes gleaming like a blade in the dark. But in his mind, the gears were already turning. They thought they could humiliate him. They did not know that every word, every gesture was being recorded. And when the truth came to light, the entire system would tremble. He placed the boarding pass back on his lap, a silent declaration. And from that silence, a storm waited to rise. The sharp rhythm of Marla Keating's heels struck against the carpeted floor, cold and relentless, like the drumbeat leading someone to the gallows. "Follow me," she commanded, no longer hiding her disdain. Adrian Cole rose. He did not argue, did not resist, only walked calmly behind her. But in the stillness of his eyes, a storm was already taking shape. Passengers tilted their heads to watch. Some pretended to gaze out the window. Others could not hide their curiosity. Phones lifted, lenses capturing every step of the man being escorted out of first class. Sabrina Vale smirked, sipping her champagne, her lips curling with triumph. In her eyes, the man being led away was nothing more than an intruder who had stumbled into the world of the wealthy. Marla stopped at the very back of the plane, right by the lavatory, where the air reeked of cleaning chemicals. She pointed at the cramped, crooked-backed seat. "This will be your temporary accommodation," she emphasized each word with rigid authority. Adrian looked down. The seat was half, blocked by a hastily shoved bag, the recline nearly broken. The lavatory door groaned open and slammed shut again, its metallic snap grating. "This is not the seat I purchased." His voice was low, steady, cutting through the false veneer like a blade drawn slowly. Marla lifted her chin, forcing a brittle smile. "We're doing our best, sir. You'll be reimbursed." He said nothing. He only held her gaze. That silence stretched, his composure itself becoming an unspoken accusation. Then he sat, not in surrender, but to observe, to record, to witness. Marla turned and left, but her posture was too stiff, her hands too rigid, a sign she knew she had gone too far. 3 rows up, a young man tilted his laptop screen, angling his phone camera discreetly. The tiny red light blinked evidence. In first class, Sabrina reclined further into her seat, laughing with the passenger beside her, her voice echoing loud as if to drown out the murmurs. But through the lenses of scattered phones, her laughter over champagne contrasted starkly with Adrian being forced to sit by the lavatory. Adrian unlocked his phone, his fingers typing slowly. Protocol echo. Document everything. Start soft. The message vanished. He leaned his head back, eyes half closed. Not to rest, but to listen. The creak of folding seats, the hum of whispers, the small voice of a child asking her mother, "Mom, why did they move him? He looked so calm." The mother bent down, replying softly, "Sometimes calm is stronger than loud." Down the aisle, Theo Park appeared again. He looked at Adrian, lips pressed tight, guilt written in his eyes. No words were spoken, but remorse was plain. Adrian gave a slight nod. He understood. The young man was still bound by the system, but at least he dared to face the truth. Outside the window, baggage carts crawled across the tarmac like beetles. The plane had not yet left the gate, which meant time remained. Opportunity remained. Adrian tapped his fingers lightly on the armrest, not in impatience, but as the beat of a plan forming. In the cabin, whispers spread like fire in dry grass. Why is he back there? Didn't they say it was his seat? I saw the manifest on the tablet. Curiosity was giving way to doubt. Adrian opened his eyes. A faint smile touched his lips. They thought they had buried him at the end of the aisle. But it was from here that he would turn the entire flight upside down. The cabin was filled with artificial light, yet no one felt at ease. The air was heavy like glass, and everyone sensed the wrongness hanging over them. The whispers grew louder, scattered through the rows like the murmur of an underground tide. Adrian Cole sat by the lavatory, his boarding pass resting on his lap like silent evidence. But his eyes were not silent. They observed, they recorded, they waited. Marla Keating advanced, her heels striking the carpet in steady rhythm, her voice sugar, coated but laced with venom. "Sir, for the sake of other passengers, please remain here. We are still waiting on confirmation." Adrian lifted his gaze, locking eyes with her. His voice was not raised, yet it carried through the air, every word landing like a hammer blow. "I have presented my boarding pass. The system has confirmed. Your staff has confirmed. So why am I still being denied?" Silence swept over the cabin. A passenger cleared his throat. A woman whispered to her husband, "He's right." Phones rose again, their cameras glowing. Marla pressed her lips together, her eyes sharp as blades. "You are disrupting the cabin. If you keep this up, we may have to call airport security." The words fell like sparks onto dry straw. The cabin erupted in murmurs. Security. For a seat? But he already proved it. Adrian rose. He did not shout, did not flail. He only stood tall, calm yet unyielding, like an ancient tree in the middle of a storm. "Ladies and gentlemen," he began, his eyes sweeping the cabin, "I am not causing a disruption. I am only asking to sit in the seat I purchased. This boarding pass proves it. Yet I have been expelled from first class and forced to sit by the lavatory. This is no longer an error. This is a refusal." The noise swelled. A young man streamed live, his voice low but urgent. "He's telling the truth. They're kicking him out, even though it's his seat." The viewer count soared by the second. In first class, Sabrina Vale turned back, her eyes flashing as she saw phones raised everywhere. She frowned, muttering, "This is absurd. He's just trying to make a scene." But at that moment, the quiet tide in the cabin had broken into waves. Theo Park stepped forward, his hand trembling slightly but his voice steady. "I've checked twice. Gate confirms. Mr. Cole is assigned to seat 1A. No mistake." The entire cabin gasped. Some passengers nodded. Others turned their eyes toward Marla. The couple in row 2 whispered, "What will she say now?" Marla clutched her notepad tightly, her lips curving into a brittle smile. "System errors happen. We'll wait for written confirmation. Until then, he stays where he is." Adrian drew in a deep breath, then took a step forward, his voice clear and resonant. "I do not need more paperwork. The truth is already enough. What I am asking for is not privilege. It is a rightful seat, the same dignity any passenger deserves." The whispers flared again, spreading like fire across dry grass. A woman leaned to her friend. "He's right. If they can do this to him, they can do it to any of us." Marla faltered, then snapped through gritted teeth. "Ben, check with the gate again." But Adrian had already sat down, composed, steady as a lion at rest. He knew the more witnesses there were, the more cameras pointed his way, the harder it would be to twist the truth. In his coat pocket, his phone buzzed gently. Adrian pulled it out, reading the message on the glowing screen. "Echo confirmed. Documentation live. Network visibility rising." A glint of light flickered in his eyes. The plan was in motion. Marla did not know. Sabrina had no clue. Passengers were still half doubtful, but just one more step, and every mask would fall. Adrian leaned back, his hand tightening around the boarding pass. He whispered softly, only for himself to hear. "Good. Let them push themselves into the corner." The intercom crackled to life, usually reserved for polite announcements. But this time its tone was icy, turning the cabin into a public courtroom. Marla Keating's voice hissed through the speakers. "He's trying to fake a boarding pass. There's a chance he forged it. He's becoming aggressive." The words fell like a bomb. Passengers gasped. A woman in row 4 spun to her husband. "Did she just say forged ticket?" A young man whispered. "I saw him show his ID twice. That's not right." Stunned eyes turned toward Adrian Cole. Curiosity had shifted into tension. Doubt mixed with anger. Adrian rose to his feet. He did not shout. He did not posture. He simply stood there, his hands relaxed at his sides, his composure so steady it was unsettling. Theo Park rushed forward, his voice trembling. "Mr. Cole, she just said," Adrian nodded, his gaze distant. "I know. She thinks she can bend the truth, but she doesn't realize every word she just is being recorded." Phones rose higher throughout the cabin. No more secrecy. Dozens of passengers now recorded openly. They had heard it with their own ears, seen it with their own eyes. In seat 1A, Sabrina Vale had gone pale. She no longer reclined with smug laughter. The eyes around her made the champagne glass in her hand tremble. In the cockpit, Captain Raymond Holt frowned as the system fed him a transcript. The accusation of forged ticket, aggressive behavior. He left his seat, stepped into the cabin under the weight of 100 expectant eyes. "Which passenger?" His voice was deep, commanding. Marla swallowed hard, then pointed toward Adrian. "Mr. Cole." Adrian calmly presented his passport, his boarding pass, and his executive identification card from Ether Aviation Group. The captain examined them, cross, checking with the manifest on Theo's tablet. He nodded firmly. "These are valid. And according to our records, Mr. Cole is not just a passenger. He is a priority executive and majority shareholder of this airline's parent company." The cabin erupted, gasps, then shouts. "What?" "He owns the airline." Marla froze, her face drained of color, her lips moving without sound. Sabrina Vale stammered, I didn't know who you were." Adrian turned, his eyes sharp as steel. "That is exactly the problem. You should not need to know who I am to offer respect. Respect is not a privilege. It is an obligation." Applause broke out from the economy cabin. At first scattered, then swelling, until the entire cabin thundered with clapping hands. Not joyous applause, but heavy, unrelenting, the sound of justice made undeniable. Adrian sat back down, his gaze drifting toward the window. But inside, the gears kept turning. This was only the beginning. One careless lie over the intercom had just become irrefutable evidence. And from this moment on, not just an individual, but the entire system would have to answer. The cabin trembled after the captain revealed Adrian Cole's true identity. The applause still echoed like a bell tolling, signaling the balance of power had shifted. Yet Marla Keating stood frozen, her face stiff, clinging to the last scraps of control. The cabin door suddenly opened. The sharp rhythm of heels struck the carpet, crisp and commanding. Every passenger turned their head. Entering was Dana Wu, 42, Chief Operations Officer of Ether Aviation Group. Her short hair was perfectly styled, her grey suit sleek, her eyes sharp as blades. Her presence alone shifted the atmosphere. "Mr. Cole," she gave a short nod, her gaze filled with respect. "I apologize for what you've endured." Silence blanketed the cabin. Passengers who had been doubtful now looked at Dana as if a judge had entered a courtroom. Dana turned to Marla, her voice low, but every word a hammer. "Ms. Keating, please gather your things. You'll be coming with us for immediate questioning." Marla's face drained of color. She stammered, "You don't understand, I was told." Dana cut her off, her tone like ice. "Then you'll have a chance to explain, but not here. Not in front of the passengers you've just misled." Two plainclothes security officers stepped inside, flanking Marla. Phones rose across the cabin, recording the unprecedented sight. A chief flight attendant escorted out before the plane could even depart. Applause erupted again, this time louder, stronger. No longer just an acknowledgement of justice, but a release of the suffocating tension that had filled the cabin for nearly an hour. Sabrina Vale still sat in seat 1A. Her face was pale, her hand trembling as she set her champagne glass onto the tray. The smug smile was gone. The air of victory vanished. Only fear remained, her eyes locked on Adrian, waiting for judgment. Adrian walked forward slowly. He stopped in front of seat 1A, where Sabrina shrank into herself. "What did you say when I stood here? That I didn't belong?" His voice was low, measured, but carried weight. Sabrina whispered, I didn't know." Adrian's eyes fixed on her. "That is the problem. You should not need to know who I am to treat me with respect." The cabin went utterly silent. Those words pierced everyone. Not just Sabrina, not just Marla, but every passenger who had stayed silent, looked away, or accepted injustice as normal. Captain Raymond Holt stepped forward, his voice grave. "Mr. Cole, as majority shareholder, do you wish to proceed with this flight?" Adrian was silent for a few moments. He looked around, meeting every gaze, embarrassed, regretful, stunned. Then he spoke, his voice ringing like thunder. "Noble, this flight will not continue until accountability is restored." The cabin erupted once more. A passenger whispered, "He's stopping the entire flight?" Another gasped, "Can he even do that?" Adrian returned to seat 1A, offering no further explanation. His very presence there was the declaration. This seat was his, by right, by law, by truth. In his pocket, his phone vibrated. A single line appeared on the screen. "Echo escalation approved. Ready for fleet-wide directive." Adrian closed his eyes briefly, then opened them, his gaze sharp as steel. Enough. This was no longer about a seat. This was a reckoning for the skies themselves. Flight 2207's cabin felt as if it had stopped breathing. Marla Keating had been escorted out. Sabrina Vale sat frozen, her hand gripping the cold armrest of seat 1A. But the focus of the entire cabin was no longer on that seat. Every eye, every camera, every heartbeat of expectation was fixed on one man, Adrian Cole. He sat upright, boarding pass still in his hand, like a flag of justice. The phone in his pocket buzzed softly. Adrian pulled it out, the encrypted message glowing on the screen. "Echo escalation approved. Ready for fleet-wide directive." His eyes flashed. This was no longer about one flight, no longer about personal humiliation. This was the decisive moment for an system. He typed 3 words, "Ground the fleet." With a single tap, a signal rippled through the entire Ether Aviation Group network. Dozens of planes in the air, hundreds of crews, thousands of passengers, all would be affected. A decision no CEO had ever dared to make in silence. But Adrian had just done it, right there, from the very seat 1A that had been stripped from him only minutes before. In the cockpit, Captain Raymond Holt received the notification from Central Command. "Immediate hold. No pushback. Fleet-wide freeze in effect." He glanced toward Adrian, his eyes a mix of awe and respect. The cabin erupted in whispers. What did they say? All flights stopped? Impossible. He can't do that, can he? A woman shook her head, eyes wide. He just did. At the Ground Operations Center, warning lights blinked furiously across the massive board. Ether flights simultaneously shifted status, delayed, return to gate, hold. Supervisors looked on in shock, but quickly understood. The order had not come from routine command. It had come directly from the chairman himself. Back in the cabin, Dana Wu stepped closer, her voice low and steady. Fleet freeze confirmed. Media will know in minutes. Adrian gave a slight nod. Good. Let them know. Let them see. Sabrina Vale jumped to her feet, her face pale. You can't do this. You'll bankrupt the airline. Adrian turned, his gaze glacial. I won't bankrupt the airline. I'll bankrupt silence. And every system that thought disrespect was cheaper than justice. The entire cabin seemed to shudder at his words. Applause thundered, louder, stronger than at any moment before. No longer scattered, no longer hesitant. Now every passenger joined, each clap like a hammer striking down the false wall that had just collapsed. A male passenger spoke out, his voice trembling yet exhilarated. I came here for a flight, and I think I just witnessed history. Adrian leaned back, his eyes scanning the cabin. He saw shame on Sabrina's face, the helplessness in Marla's eyes as she was escorted away, and the quiet admiration shining in Theo Park's gaze. He knew. This moment would not stay within the cabin. It would erupt beyond, spreading like fire, consuming silence, forcing the entire airline industry to bow its head. His phone buzzed again. A new system alert appeared. Media alert. #grounded for justice trending worldwide. Adrian allowed himself a faint smile. Not the smile of victory, but the smile of a man who knew a greater battle had just begun. As Flight 2207 sat motionless at the gate, the world outside was already in upheaval. Screens across airports lit up in red with the words delayed, return to gate. On the financial boards of New York, tickers flashed as Ether Aviation Group stock plummeted 7% in just 30 minutes. News outlets exploded. CEO grounds entire fleet amid discrimination scandal. Adrian Cole freezes skies after first-class controversy. A media storm unlike any other, and all of it traced back to the man in a grey hoodie seated in row 1A. Inside the cabin, passengers' phones rang non-stop. Videos showing Marla Keating accusing him of carrying a forged ticket had already gone viral. The hashtag, #GroundedForJustice, erupted, climbing to the top of global trends in under 40 minutes. Sabrina Vale shrank into seat 1A, her face drained of color. Every clap of applause, every camera turned toward Adrian, pierced her illusions of power like blades. Adrian remained still, eyes fixed on the window. He no longer needed words. His silence was the wind fanning the storm. His phone buzzed again. He opened it and saw the message from the system. Trace complete. External comms confirmed. Internal proxy detected. A name appeared in bold. Victor Ames, Senior VP of Strategic Investments. Adrian's eyes narrowed. Victor Ames, 55, a veteran of the industry, a respected figure, the same man who had publicly opposed Adrian's push for an anti-bias charter across the entire group. Now it was clear, he wasn't just an opponent, he was the one pulling the strings. Adrian recalled last month's board meeting, Victor's voice sharp. This charter is political nonsense. It will scare investors. Adrian had only smiled then. But now he understood. Victor hadn't simply resisted. He had orchestrated a setup to break him. Adrian opened a secure channel, his voice low and steady. Dana, trace confirmed. Ames is behind this. He used proxy clearance to direct Marla to trigger the incident. to create a crisis of confidence. On the other end, Dana Wu gripped her phone tightly, her eyes dark. They wanted a scandal. The CEO humiliated on his own airline. Headlines right themselves. Market crashes. Perfect timing for an internal coup. Adrian nodded slightly. But they forgot one thing. I was watching. In the cabin, Theo Park approached, his voice hushed. "Mr. Cole, I overheard something earlier." Marla, before she was taken off, whispered into her phone, "The target is neutralized. No resistance." She didn't say passenger. She said target. Adrian turned to the young man, his eyes glinting. "Thank you. That's enough." Theo swallowed hard and stepped back, but his gaze was no longer uncertain. It was the gaze of someone who had chosen to stand on the side of truth. Adrian reopened his phone, his fingers moving swiftly. "Escalate. Freeze all assets linked to Victor Ames. Pull credentials. He doesn't leave the building tonight." A minute later, confirmation appeared. "Done. Ames locked out. Financial accounts frozen. Security notified." Adrian leaned back in his seat, his eyes distant. The game was no longer about Seat 1A. Its true face had been revealed, an internal rebellion disguised as prejudice, turning humiliation into a financial weapon. But what they had not expected was that Adrian Cole was not a pawn. He was the one holding the board. The cabin fell silent again. Passengers sat frozen, feeling as though they were watching a film unfold before their eyes. But for Adrian, this was no film. This was reality. And he was the author of the unfolding drama that was reshaping the skies. He whispered softly, only for himself, "Victor Ames, your game is over." The cabin of Flight 2207 felt stretched to its breaking point. Passengers sat in silence, phones still recording, every eye fixed on the man in the grey hoodie. Adrian Cole knew this moment was no longer just about him. It belonged to everyone who had ever been dismissed, pushed out of their rightful seat, or treated as though they did not belong. He unlocked his phone. A preloaded encrypted command glowed on the screen. Adrian typed slowly, each word carved into history. Ground all active flights under Ether Aviation. Emergency status. Full review. The message vanished. Within minutes, from Los Angeles to New York, from Dallas to Chicago, dozens of flights received orders to make emergency landings. Pilots were stunned, passengers shocked. The media erupted. Inside the cabin, Dana Wu stepped forward, her voice steady though her eyes blazed. "Fleet grounding confirmed. 47 aircraft ordered to hold or return. Media already reporting." Murmurs spread like fire through the rows. "He grounded the whole airline? No way. God, this man just stopped the skies." A little girl turned to her mother, eyes wide. "Mum, can he really do that?" The mother nodded faintly, her voice trembling. "Yes, and he just did." Adrian rose. He needed no microphone, no intercom. His voice carried just enough, but with a weight that silenced the cabin. This is not about champagne, not about legroom. It is about respect, about accountability. From this moment, silence is no longer acceptable currency in the skies. Each word landed like a hammer striking the brittle pillars of aviation's old order. Sabrina Vale covered her face, trembling. The seat that once symbolized false privilege had become a seat of punishment. All eyes turned toward her, not with scorn, but as witnesses to a system that had long enabled prejudice. At the back row, Theo Park swallowed hard, his hand clenched around a service tray. He knew he had just witnessed an event that would enter history, and that he himself had chosen the right side. Captain Raymond Holt stepped out of the cockpit. His face was stern, but his eyes glimmered as if seeing something he had never thought possible. He bowed his head slightly to Adrian. "Mr. Cole, orders received. Fleet is grounded." Adrian nodded. "Thank you, Captain. Today, we don't just fly aircraft. We reset the skies." Outside, the cabin door swung open. Airport security entered, escorting Marla Keating away amid a storm of whispers and the glow of phone cameras. No one concealed the truth any longer. The entire cabin stood, many breaking into applause, not for a journey, but to bid farewell to a decaying system that had finally collapsed. Adrian looked around, his gaze sweeping across every face. He saw shame, admiration, and hope. He knew this was only the beginning. He pulled out his phone and sent one final command. "Open Skies Portal Live. All employees, all passengers, every voice heard. Effective now." A confirmation appeared. Adrian closed his eyes and exhaled. For the first time in years, he felt the skies truly still. Flight 2207 would not take off today. But from this moment on, aviation would never fly the same way again. You have seen it yourself. From the denial of a single seat, 1A, Adrian Cole turned the entire sky into a court of justice. It was no longer about one flight, but the beginning of a wave of change. He did not shout. He did not argue. He simply made a quiet decision, and the entire airline industry was forced to bow its head. But the question that remains is for you. If one day you are pushed out of the seat that rightfully belongs to you, not because of a mistake, but because of prejudice, will you sit in silence and endure it? Or will you rise and change the system itself? If this story resonates with you, press like to show your support, share so others can see it too, and don't forget to subscribe so you never miss the next stories, where the smallest of moments can shake the entire world. And leave a comment below. What would you do if you were in Adrian Cole's place? Because sometimes it only takes one person daring to stand up, to rewrite the rules for everyone.